Her name was Amara, and she controlled men who could end lives with a phone call. She moved money across borders. She decided who lived and who disappeared. Powerful people feared her name, but if you saw her today, walking the streets of Chicago with a camera in her hands, you wouldn't even notice her. Because Amara gave it all up. The power, the fear, the control. She walked away from an empire to become nobody. And for a while, it worked. Until she fell in love. And when she did, her past came back, and it forced her to make a choice that would destroy everything. Subscribe right now and comment where you are watching from, because this story will mess you up. So how does a woman go from controlling an underworld empire to hiding behind a camera? Let me show you. Amara was born in Johannesburg, South Africa. Her mother was African, strong, warm, proud. Her father was Korean, quiet, disciplined, distant. And Amara? She was stuck in the middle. In her mother's community, she was too different, too light-skinned, too foreign, not African enough. In her father's family, she was an outsider, not Korean, not pure, not one of them. She didn't fit anywhere. So she learned to survive differently. She stopped trying to belong. She started watching instead. She studied people, how they talked, how they moved, who they feared, who they followed. While other kids played, Amara sat in corners and observed. And she noticed something. Loud people got attention. Loud people made enemies. Loud people died young. But quiet people survived. Quiet people saw everything. And if you were smart enough, silence became power. Her father worked in import and export. That's what he told people anyway. But Amara saw the truth. She saw the late-night meetings, the men in expensive cars who never smiled, the stacks of cash her father hid in the walls. He never explained, but she didn't need him to. By the time she was 16, Amara understood how the world really worked. It didn't matter where you came from. It didn't matter what you looked like. All that mattered was what you could control. If you're hooked already, subscribe and comment, keep going. But silence alone wouldn't save her, because soon, everything her father built was about to burn. Amara's father died when she was 19. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't natural. It was a message. He'd crossed the wrong people, owed money he couldn't pay, made promises he couldn't keep, and one night, they came for him. Amara's mother broke down. She cried for weeks. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. But Amara? She didn't shed a single tear. She just watched, waited, and started planning. The men who killed her father thought they'd won. They thought his network was theirs now. They started fighting over it, over territory, over shipments, over who was in charge. They made a lot of noise, and noise brings attention. Amara stayed silent. She didn't walk into rooms demanding respect. She didn't threaten anyone. She didn't make speeches. Instead, she found the cracks. She talked to the people no one cared about. The drivers, the runners, the ones who actually did the work but never got paid enough. She didn't make big promises. She just solved small problems. She paid them fairly, protected them when others didn't, listened when no one else would. And slowly, people started listening to her. Within 2 years, every man who'd killed her father was gone. Some got arrested, some disappeared, some just stopped showing up, and the ones who were left, they didn't answer to a loud boss anymore. They answered to her. But here's the thing, Amara never called herself the boss. She never sat at the head of any table. She never made a single public threat. She just moved, quietly, and everyone obeyed. No one said her name out loud, but everyone knew. Nothing moved without her permission, and that power, it came faster than she ever expected. Within a few years, she was untouchable, but being untouchable meant being completely alone. By the time Amara turned 25, she had everything. More money than she could spend, more influence than she needed, more fear than she ever wanted. People in Johannesburg, Nairobi, and Seoul moved when she said so. Deals happened because she approved them. Operations waited on her word. She was powerful, feared, untouchable. And she hated it, because there was no one left, no one she could trust, no one who saw her as a person, no one who loved her. Every conversation was a negotiation. Every smile hid something. Every friendship had a motive. She lived in a penthouse, but slept alone. She controlled everything, but felt nothing. One night, she stood in front of the mirror and stared at herself, and she asked a question. Is this it? Is this all my life will ever be? The answer made her sick. So she did something no one expected. She walked away. Not loud, not dramatic. She didn't announce it or throw a party. She just left. She handed control to the few people she still trusted, made sure everything would keep running, erased her name from every document, every deal, every conversation. And then she disappeared. She sold everything, changed her name, bought a one-way ticket to Chicago. And when she landed, she became no one. No empire, no power, no throne. Just a woman with a camera trying to figure out who she was without all of it. Real talk. If you had that kind of power, could you walk away? Comment and let me know. Amara thought leaving would give her peace, but you can't just hide from your past. And soon, someone she loved was going to pay the price. Chicago became her hiding place. She rented a tiny apartment in a neighborhood where people minded their own business, bought a used camera off Craigslist, started taking photos, weddings, street festivals, small events. She called herself a freelance photographer, and technically she was, but really, she was just trying to disappear. And it worked. In Chicago, no one knew her. No one feared her. No one even looked twice at her. She smiled at strangers, paid her rent on time, showed up to gigs with her camera, and left quietly. For the first time in years, Amara felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. She could walk into a room without calculating who had power. She could have a conversation without wondering what someone wanted from her. She could sleep through the night without listening for footsteps. She was free. At least, that's what she thought. Because freedom is fragile. And the second you let someone in, everything can fall apart. And that's exactly what happened. One random job, one simple conversation, and everything changed. It was a Saturday. Amara was hired to shoot photos at a small Korean cultural festival. Nothing special, just families, food, performances. She moved through the crowd with her camera, invisible, comfortable. And then someone walked up to her. He was Korean, mid-30s, calm, warm smile. The kind of guy who didn't try too hard, but somehow stood out anyway. "Excuse me, are you the photographer?" Amara nodded. "I'm Ji Hun," he said. "I work in tech. We're about to launch a project, and we need some photos for the website. Professional, but not too stiff, you know? Would you be interested?" It was simple, normal, safe. Amara said yes. They exchanged numbers. He thanked her and walked off. She didn't think about it again. But over the next few weeks, they kept running into each other. Once for the shoot, once at a coffee shop to go over edits, once by accident at a bookstore. And somewhere in those moments, something shifted. Ji Hun wasn't like other people she'd met. He didn't ask a million questions, didn't try to impress her, didn't push. He just existed, comfortably. He told her about his work, about his dad who passed away, about his weird love for 90s R&B, and for the first time in years, Amara let her guard down. She laughed, really laughed. She told him stories, small ones, safe ones. She let herself feel normal. She started to care. But what neither of them knew was this. That connection, it was about to bring danger Amara thought she'd left behind forever. Amara and Ji Hun started spending more time together. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became long walks. Long walks became late-night talks that stretched until 2 a.m. And somewhere in all of that, Amara started to feel something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. Ji Hun made her feel seen. Not as a tool, not as a threat, just as a person. And slowly, she let him in. One night, they were sitting on a bench by the river. Ji Hun got quiet. Then he said something that caught her off guard. "My dad died 2 years ago." Amara looked at him. "I'm sorry," she said. He nodded. "Yeah, me too. But the hard part isn't that he's gone, it's what he left behind." "What do you mean?" "Debt," Ji Hun said. "A lot of it. I didn't even know until after the funeral. And the people he owed, they're not the forgiving type." He rubbed his face. "I've been paying it off slowly, but it's not enough. They keep adding interest, fees, whatever they feel like." Amara's chest tightened. "What do they want?" "Everything," Ji Hun said. "But I'll figure it out. I always do." He smiled, but Amara could see the weight he was carrying. She didn't push, didn't ask more questions, but something inside her shifted. She felt it, that old instinct. Protect him. A week later, everything changed. Ji Hun was walking home late from work. It was dark, quiet. Then 3 men stepped out of the shadows. They didn't rob him. They didn't touch him. They just stood there, blocking his path. One of them spoke. "Your father's debt isn't going away, Ji Hun. You keep stalling. We're going to start taking things. You understand?" Another one shoved him, hard. His back hit the wall. "Pay up, or we'll find another way to collect." Then they left. Ji Hun stood there in the alley, shaking, heart pounding. He didn't tell Amara at first, but she noticed. He seemed off, distracted, nervous. A few days later, he finally told her, and when he did, Amara's blood went cold. Not because she was scared, but because she knew. She knew exactly what kind of people these were. She knew what they'd do next if Ji Hun didn't pay. And without thinking, she made a decision. She'd protect him. But protecting Ji Hun meant stepping back into a world she swore she'd never touch again. And someone was watching. The threats didn't stop. They showed up at Ji Hun's apartment, slid notes under his door, called him at work. The debt kept growing. The pressure kept building. Amara watched it happen, and she stayed quiet. But inside, she was already working. She made a few calls, quiet ones, to people she hadn't spoken to in years. She asked questions, dropped a few names, listened carefully. Within 3 days, she knew everything. Who Ji Hun's father owed, how much, and who was collecting now. It wasn't a big operation, just mid-level guys working for a local crew. Small-time enforcers trying to squeeze money out of whoever they could. Nothing she couldn't handle. So Amara did what she always did. She moved in silence. One phone call, one favor from someone who still owed her. And just like that, the threat stopped. The men who cornered Ji Hun? Gone. The debt? Erased. No explanation. No noise. Ji Hun couldn't believe it. "I don't get it," he said one night. "They just stopped. Like I never existed." Amara nodded. Maybe they found someone else. He wanted to believe that, and for a few days, he did. But Amara knew the truth, and so did someone else. Because the people she'd called, they started asking questions. Who's this woman in Chicago? Why does she care about some random guy? Wait, is she back? Word spread, quietly, carefully, and soon the wrong people started paying attention. Real question. Would you risk everything to protect someone you love? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you're still here, subscribe. It's about to get heavy. Amara thought she could fix things without being seen, but she was wrong. And now, Ji Hun was in more danger than before. A few nights later, Ji Hun showed up at Amara's door. He looked shaken, confused. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside. He walked in slowly, like he wasn't sure he should be there. "The debt's gone," he said. "Just gone. No calls, no threats, nothing." He stared at her. "Amara, what did you do?" She didn't answer right away. "I helped," she said quietly. "How? Does it matter?" "Yes," Ji Hun said. His voice was firm now. "It matters to me." Silence. He stepped closer. "Who are you?" Amara felt her chest tighten. She'd been dreading this moment, but she knew it was coming. So she told him. Not everything, but enough. She told him about Johannesburg, about her father, about the world she grew up in. She told him she used to have power, real power, the kind that made people disappear. She told him she walked away, that she came to Chicago to start over, that the woman he knew, the photographer, the quiet one, that's who she wanted to be now. But Ji Hun didn't look relieved. He looked scared. "So those men who threatened me, you made them stop?" "Yes." "How?" "It's better if you don't know." He took a step back. "Amara," his voice cracked. "Are you dangerous?" She wanted to say no. She wanted to lie, but she couldn't. Not to him. "I was," she said softly, "but I'm not anymore." Ji Hun stared at her for a long time. Then he turned and walked to the door. "I need some time," he said, and he left. The woman he loved wasn't who he thought she was, and now Amara had a choice. Go back to the life she left behind, or lose him forever. Days went by. Ji Hun didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up. Amara understood. She'd seen that look before, in other people's eyes. Fear, confusion, the slow realization that the person you trust might hurt you. She thought about reaching out, maybe explaining more, maybe trying to fix it. But deep down, she knew. Love can't survive fear. And as long as her past existed, Ji Hun would never feel safe with her. So Amara made her final decision. She called the few people who still knew her real name, told them she was done, completely. No more favors, no more calls, no more ties. She handed over the last piece of control she had left, burned every bridge, erased herself one last time. And then she did something she never thought she'd do. She left Chicago. One night, she stood outside Ji Hun's apartment building. She looked up at his window. The lights were on. She could go up, knock on the door, explain everything, try one more time. But she didn't, because she loved him enough to let him go. So she turned around, got in her car, and drove away. No goodbye, no letter, no explanation. Just gone. She packed her camera, a few clothes, and moved to a new city. New name, new life. Some people say Amara's still out there, walking streets no one notices, taking pictures of moments no one remembers. Others say she disappeared for good. But if you ever see a quiet woman with a camera, someone who moves like a shadow, someone who watches the world like she's seen it all before, Maybe that's her, still hiding, still free, still choosing silence over power. If this story hit you, subscribe and drop a comment with your thoughts. I read every single one. And let me know, do you think Amara made the right choice? Some say she disappeared forever. Others believe she's still out there, watching the world through a lens.